structure is number one. Number two, how we bring business into the table, how we bring community experience with other projects, how business can participate into that to support the movement, especially in the employment part, and how faith-based organizations, and we have many of them here, and how faith-based organizations in a city like Bridgeport can support also, especially on the family structure side. Thank you.
So, great question. We get this a lot. The question always comes down to family structure. And here's one of the things that we've learned from the health sector. The health sector has been using data for improvement for years, 2 decades now. They had a driver, right? They had a cost driver. Hospitals were getting sued. They needed to improve service. In order to improve service, they drove down costs because they weren't getting sued as much. We in education don't seem to have that, right? We don't have this financial impetus that puts us in this position. That said, we've got to start improving, right? Because we know that a lot of the social ills that you see in healthcare or see in neighborhoods or across the community are partly because of education. So the question comes down to this for me. I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer on families and their role. I don't have the answer on the faith-based community. I don't have the answer on employment. You all have the answer, right? You all have the answer. So if you all believe fundamentally that employment is important, one question you could ask is, what are your high demand careers in Bridgeport? Right? In Cincinnati, we found out that they were health, and I'm betting that's one here. It is in almost every community. Advanced manufacturing or technology and construction, believe it or not. Cincinnati's going through it. The question that we had to ask was, how are we preparing people for those jobs? Right? The hospitals were telling us they had thousands of job openings every day going unfilled. So we started to build career pathways, right? Career pathways so that a person that's at the hospital can actually take classes, right? Who already works there in order to climb the ladder, and they make classes super accessible to people who may not have a job at all so they can get into the entry-level jobs. If that is something that's important to you, we're at Housatonic. There's the president. Oh, that's not. Great to see you. My bet is there's something amazing going on here right now around employment. Something. It could only be for 50 kids right now. But if you figure out what the practice is that they're employing, maybe we could find a way for Housatonic to expand that. And maybe there's another college down the road that could emulate it, right? But if we let these things happen in silos, nobody ever knows about them, right? Nobody ever knows about them. That's why I say I will never come back to Bridgeport again. And some of you are like, awesome. If you don't put the data on the wall. One of your outcomes I'm looking at right here is employment. Put employment where you are right here in your high demand career sectors, and then go to Housatonic and say, how are you tackling this? Show us how you're tackling this, right? If you believe that parent engagement is really important related to employment, I know there's a couple 2-gen strategies. PT, partners, I don't know anything about it. Okay, great, there it is. I just heard about it the other day. It sounded really interesting to me. Are the people in the PT Partners program, are they getting jobs? And are their kids succeeding in school? If the answer is yes, put it on the wall. Put it on the wall. And don't make it all about PT. Make it about what they are doing. Don't make it about the program. Make it about their practices so that other people can learn from that practice and maybe consider doing it in what they're doing right now, right? So these are the things. I don't have the answer to your question, but my bet is Bridgeport has the answers to your questions. And if you don't put the data on the wall and work hard to identify those initiatives, those interventions, those services, those supports that are actually getting results, we're never going to make any progress. So I would say look in your own backyard, right? Look right here. Look right here, right now. Take the time to figure out what's working. Make sure the Bridgeport process has the people they need to actually go analyze that data and bring it to you. Make sure they have that support. And if they do, I can tell you, every time you come to one of these meetings, you're going to get information you had no idea. Right? You were like, oh my God, I had no idea that was happening in neighborhood XYZ. Or I had no idea that was happening in school ABC. And that is the power of these partnerships. When you start to understand that and start taking those practices to scale, that is when you really start to achieve this thing called collective impact. That is when it all starts to happen.
Any more questions? We'll take 2 more questions.
I don't see a lot of times in the newspaper
Yeah, so unfortunately, right, so there was a story on this. I was running through the Chicago airport, this was like 4 or 5 years ago now, and I was running through the airport as you only do in a parent. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anybody walking through, right? But you're running through, and I look over and I see the Tribune, and the headline is, high school graduation rates worst in the decade. And of course it's education related, so I grab it, throw some money on the table, run on. I get on the plane, and I see the subheading is, all other metrics improving. Right? Literally, that's what it said. And I thought to myself, oh my God, right? We love to use data for one big purpose, admiring the problem, right? We love to use data to sit back and be like, that's horrible. And then go and do the exact same thing we've always been doing. It is very hard to get media focused on solutions. There is a whole movement emerging called solutions-focused journalism, where they actually do shine a light on positive examples. But that's partly our fault. And I say our because when I worked in nonprofits, when I worked in schools, I never lifted up the things that were working. I tended to focus on the things that were not working because that's what attracted more money. Does that make sense? So create an environment where success breeds success, right? Invite your local newspaper to your data room, right? Put data all over the walls and have them come and say, look, we found something. Now, we're not perfect. We know there's some things that got to work, but invite them so that when the headlines come out, they don't focus on just the problem. They actually focus on some solutions. Last question, because I know we got to move.
You talked about, you showed the slide with the 3 tutoring programs and that they weren't getting really differentiated results that they were offering. What I've seen in the work that I've done is that when you have a situation similar to that, or you have a program that's not producing results, and they say, well, we're replicating a evidence-based model, we're doing that. And the conversation turns to the problem with these kids is, and you list the things. And so I'm wondering, what does it take to change that conversation? Because that conversation goes long and it goes deep, but it doesn't actually result in positive differences for the kids.
Yeah. And it's not often just pointing at the kids, it's then pointing at the parents. Right, so we get that whole, or the neighborhood, or every other social ill that has ever existed. That's why one of the things I love about this report is on the front you put the landscape indicators, which are other factors, not necessarily educational in nature, that are impacting that. But there's a lot of ways to answer that question, right? There's a lot of things that go on there, but most of the time the reason for that is that the programs do not feel safe talking about failure, right? A school, certainly, I don't know, Fran, I've heard you've done a fabulous job creating an environment where improvement can happen in schools. So that, just a tribute to you on that, that's what I hear national buzz about that. What most of the time though is a nonprofit says, if they put their data on the wall like that said it wasn't working the way they thought, they immediately see funding pull. Right? They immediately see a pull. And so if I had a magic wand, one of the things that I would do would be to eliminate the RFP. Everybody know what an RFP is? Request for proposals. Oh my God, right? Like, how ridiculous is this? We make decisions on funding based on who hires the best grant writer. Literally, the grant writers out there that are awesome, they know how to do this, and they're a really great resource right now. They're amazing. But I would rather employ their writing skills to talking about real solutions rather than hypothetical ones that get money, right? And so what I would love to see is that, so in Cincinnati, let me just give a practical example. There is a foundation that started up that has never released an RFP, ever. And what they do is they hire people to go in and meet with the practitioners, look at the data, figure out what's working, and then do surgical smart investments to help those entities ramp up their capacity. Does that make sense? No more RFPs. And I'm telling you, I think the reason, a lot of it, maybe it's like a portion of the reason, because there are a lot of things under what you just outlined. There's racism, structural racism, there's all kinds of things under what you just said. But one of the things is that people don't feel safe talking about failure, right? And so one of the roles that, having a United Way lead this work or another, is you can actually bring funders together who actually say, we're actually okay talking about this. And we've got the buy-in from investors that they won't yank funding, they'll actually reward improvement, right? Now, if you're harming kids, yes, probably funding needs to be taken away. But if you are actually committed authentically to improvement, that is the environment where I think you can start to have really a much more meaningful discussion. Great, thank you all very much.